Hello and welcome back to the VolReport Show. I'm Ryan Sylvia with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network, and I'm joined by Justin Rowland of Cats Illustrated Kentucky site on the Rivals Network. Justin, how you doing?
Doing well, Ryan. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you taking some time to help preview another Tennessee Kentucky rivalry matchup. This time, though, Kentucky coming in, things maybe not looking the best from the Kentucky perspective. Just kind of an overarching question: what's the fan base kind of feeling right now about Kentucky? Is frustration growing around Stoops? Kind of what are things looking like?
It's a lot of things that have stacked up, and kind of similar to how things stacked up against Calipari. A lot of the dynamics are similar, from the buyout to the trajectory of how things are going. Um, I think the fact that it's happening at the dawn of the NIL and portal era has people wondering if Stoops has the right approach or if he's the right guy. I think the number of home losses that have stacked up, home losses in conference games, losses and home losses as straight up favorites, which was something that, I mean, it used to be when things are clicking, they won the games they were supposed to win. That was kind of the foundation point. When he came in, it was like, you got to beat Missouri, you got to beat South Carolina, you got to beat Vanderbilt, and then see what happens. And they've started losing those games. And just like fundamentally, the identity of the program is gone. It's not the big blue wall and pounding opponents into submission and kind of exerting your will over four quarters. And once you get a lead, you're screwed. It's been mistakes, undisciplined, disorganization, no plan, no identity on offense. And that's why they are where they are.
Has there been any difference the last three games after that win over Ole Miss in Oxford? Has anything changed? Is there any similarities in those three losses, or is it just kind of what you were talking about, just kind of rearing its head?
Yeah. I mean, the offense has really been bad all season. I mean, you go back to the first SEC game, they scored 6 points against South Carolina, and they were outmatched, outmanned, couldn't block them. Um, the Ole Miss game, that was really just the case. They played clean. They played really clean on offense, and the defense was apparently a good matchup that day for Ole Miss. But I mean, really, the offense has been bad all season. The line has struggled to protect. They haven't had the running back play they are accustomed to. The quarterbacks haven't thrived. They just don't have any identity on offense. And my take is the defense has kind of cratered as the general trajectory of the season has gone that way. My opinion is, if the offense had been clicking, getting more first downs, giving the defense proper rest, it, doing their part to keep the team's energy level up, their spirits up, I think the defense would be playing at a higher level. But I think it's just kind of with those things where eventually they broke because they weren't getting any help.
No, with Kentucky's offense struggling going into this game against a Tennessee defense that's way better than we're used to seeing under Josh Heupel, is that a big area of concern going into this game from the Kentucky side of things?
Huge. I mean, you watch Tennessee, you look at the stats, you watch Kentucky, you look at the stats, and you got to ask you, like, how are they going to score points to win this game? And then you throw in they were missing a couple of running backs in their last game. They they obviously don't feel great about either quarterback. I mean, they benched the 5-star that they had made a 2-year investment on. Um, when I don't think it was clear that he was the issue. He might not have been the solution, the singular solution, but it wasn't clear he was the problem, in favor of Gavin Wimsatt, who is the least accurate passer in Division One, not one, but 2 years in a row. I mean, yeah, it's hard to see where the points are going to come from. It's hard to see him scoring more than 10 or 13 points, for instance, if they get there.
Yeah, that benching kind of confused me from an outside perspective
Yeah.
a little bit, where it was like, I understand this offense isn't necessarily clicking, but I wasn't sure if that was really the biggest issue that was going on with the
Yeah.
Cats offense. Gerald Mincy, obviously Tennessee transfer, he's been pretty vocal about this game at the beginning of the season. He's been on Twitter, kind of retweeting some stuff. How has he been this year? I'm just curious what his productions look like and how that transition for him has been to a third SEC school.
It's been a rough year for him. He hasn't played very well. I think I don't want to say he's the problem, but there have been a number of problems up front, and he was the guy that they brought in to be the clear fix at right tackle. And I think you're just seeing that it's really hard to recruit your way into a good offensive line. You know, they're very small handful of guys that are genuinely coveted for the right reasons. A lot of times you end up with, all right, I like the way this guy looks. I like the way his body looks. I like the way he moves. I like his pedigree coming out of high school. But 3 years, 4 years removed from high school, why is he leaving another school? I mean, why weren't they more eager to keep him? And I think you saw this year, he just hasn't played at a very high level.
Defensively, really only 2 games that the defense struggled, Florida and South Carolina. All the other games, I mean, you look at the Georgia game and you look at the Ole Miss game, obviously a game that Kentucky wins. Is it a good unit? Is it that it's obviously the strength compared to the offense, but how do you feel about the defense right now heading into this game?
I mean, it looked like a good defense. And the last couple of weeks have been, like I said, when you're not getting any help from the other side, sometimes, and that falls on leadership. What is the leadership on that side of the ball? I don't know. It's supposed to be Jamin Dumas Johnson. He came in from Georgia, that reputation as the Butkus finalist a couple of years ago. But you're also talking about a guy that everybody knew he came in, you know, with NIL, and it was a 1-year thing. And so the culture component was a strength for Stoops, and I think the constant roster turnover has made it difficult to find that leadership. I think they've made some mistakes in who they've targeted and who they've assigned. We want this guy to be a leader. We want that guy to be a leader. You want your best players to be leaders, and I don't think that they have necessarily been that this year. But it's a good defense for most of the season. I mean, they're big up front. They more than most teams can stuff the run with just like 3 or 4 men on that defensive line, and that allows them to drop a lot of guys into coverage. But Max Hairston, one of the nation's best corners, has been out for a while. That hasn't helped, and they've they haven't been great on the back end. The strength of this defense was supposed to be the front 7, and they've been pretty strong. They've gotten worse the last couple of weeks, but even against Auburn, I mean, you saw where they only collapsed after the offense kind of kept banging their head against the wall. You know, they came out, they built a 10-0 lead. They've been good for most of the year, but I would say on the back end, there's a chance to take advantage of them.
You mentioned Dumas Johnson. Who are some of the guys though that Tennessee fans should maybe be worried about on the offensive end, especially with a Tennessee offensive line that hasn't been great either and has given a lot of pressure for Nico?
Deion Walker has gotten a lot of attention this season. He doesn't have the stats that he would want, but he's taken up a lot of blockers. And Trayvon Ribka next to him they've got a big, physical, experienced defensive line that's tough to move. They're not as known for getting after it and creating havoc in the backfield, although they have done that this year. De'Aric Jackson, the middle linebacker next to Jamin Dumas Johnson, he's a playmaker. You know, he'll pick off stray passes in the middle of the field, has good instincts in coverage. J.J. Weaver, 6th year. You might know him as the guy with 6 fingers. He's been a better pass rusher. He's finished plays better in the backfield this year in his last year of college football. And those would be the main guys, the guys on the front 7. They've got some big guys that can move you and that are tough to run on.
Kind of 2-part question here. One, the beer barrel. Are you a fan of it? Do you want it to come back? And 2,
Bring it back. Yeah, bring it back. Of course, it's been long enough. Yeah.
I agree. I think anytime you get one of those cool kind of tradition things in college football, it's nice to embrace. But then number 2, obviously Kentucky struggled against Tennessee in this series, and even recently when Kentucky's clearly had better teams on paper, Tennessee's found ways to win. Is that anything? Like, do you put any credence to that, or is every season its own?
There's no doubt. No, I mean, there's no doubt. Like I've been watching college football since like 5 years old. And certain series just take on like a life of their own, right? Tennessee fans know this with Florida. Like, how many times have Tennessee fans probably looked at that Florida matchup and been like, okay, I like where we are this year. And then but you also have to bake in, they're probably not going to play their best game. And Florida's probably going to play one of their better games. And that's kind of that's the way it's been for Kentucky and Tennessee. That's not to say Kentucky's been on Tennessee's level historically, but when you've had this uptick for Kentucky, along with before Heupel, that extended downtick for Tennessee, the fact that the numbers weren't more balanced tells you that, yeah, this is just a game that you just have to assume they're not going to play great in. Same thing for Kentucky and Louisville the last few years. I think a lot of people right now with Louisville at the end of the year are assuming they're just going to beat Kentucky, but for a better part of a decade now, we just know Kentucky plays well in that game and Louisville doesn't. So I kind of expect the same thing, especially in Neyland.
For the last few years, you could say Kentucky, Florida too, up until this
year. Right. Yeah. Good point.
Number, but what does Kentucky need to do to win this game? Do they have a reasonable chance, do you think, to win? But what do they have to do to make sure that they even can pull off the upset in the end?
I mean, they got Barry on Brown returning kickoffs, and sometimes it feels like that's their best offensive play. So maybe he should bring it back from deep, even if he's 9 yards deep. But I would say the defense has got to win the turnover battle by 2 or 3, and the offense has just got to not shoot itself in the foot. And they're just not going to score a lot of touchdowns. They're not a team that scores a lot of touchdowns. It's hard for them to finish extended drives. But maybe in the fourth quarter, Alex Rayner is one of the nation's best field goal kickers. Maybe the defense plays great and it's like 12-10 Kentucky in the fourth quarter, and things are crazy, and Tennessee's turned it over 3 times. But that's really the only scenario that I could envision.
Real quick before we wrap this up, basketball season right around the corner. What are things looking like with Mark Pope over and just a little bit Kenny Brooks on the women's side too? 2 new coaches for Kentucky.
Kenny Brooks has a lot of juice. I mean, he's a charismatic guy. He's bringing in a lot of talent, and women's basketball recruiting has never been as interesting for the fan base as I would say it is now. People are genuinely believing that he's going to get them players, and the basketball program is like decidedly post Calipari. But that's what it is. It is the post Calipari era, because everything they did under Calipari, they're emphasizing the exact opposite. And so that's Kentucky kids, name on the front. We're going to have multiple year players. And I think we saw in the exhibition last night, they're not as athletic. The length and the athleticism and the jaw-dropping scouting material is not going to be as impressive as it was in the Calipari era. But, I mean, they've got like 9 guys that can knock down 3-point shots. And you can tell Pope, who has leaned very heavily into analytics, has built what should be one of the nation's better defensive teams, and it should be one of the nation's better 3-point shooting teams. They have questions like, do they have a ball handler who can break you down? How good is Lamont Butler going to be at point guard offensively in SEC play? That kind of stuff. How are some guys going to transition from a lower level of competition to a higher level? But as far as 3-D, it looks like a very interesting team, and those kind of teams can get hot at the end of the year.
Yeah, Justin, I appreciate you hopping on. Let people know where to find you.
Yeah, Rowland Rivals on X, and then Kentucky.rivals.com, Cats Illustrated on Rivals. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you guys do a great job over there. I always say if you want to be the most informed at the tailgate this Saturday and you want to know what's going on the other side with Kentucky stuff, make sure you guys go check them out, Kentucky.rivals.com or CatsIllustrated.com. They do a great job over there. But Justin, thank you again for the Tennessee side of things. Obviously, we're at VolReport.com. Links to everything you need is in the description. Thank you for watching.